we've covered so many different topics, and it's like we feel like we should never revisit them. But it just kind of hit me yesterday that these things really matter. In other words, you almost have to let it sink in just how crazy some of these modern errors are. And yes, they do matter. I was listening to a podcast about AI, and they just brushed over the jump from what we have now, which is basically glorified autocomplete. It's just nothing mysterious about it. It's not alive. It's not sentient. It's not anything. It's just a specific specialized. Just like you have computer programs that can beat a man in chess, but it's specialized. It's not a human being. It can't learn. Right. It can't think or any of those things. Well, they're talking about the first step that they're looking forward to is achieving parity with human beings. And then once we have that, since they're still computers, they're still software, they can be scaled up. So you can crank out 1 million of them and have them work 24/7 because they don't need to sleep, they don't need to eat, they don't need to get distracted or tired or anything. And so they're going to use all that to improve themselves. And then you're rapidly going to go exponential to this ASI, or artificial superintelligence. Basically, that's where we accidentally create our own God, our own replacement. Sure. And it's ridiculous. Of course, not only is that ridiculous, but even achieving AGI is pretty much hopeless, because you and I know the reason we have reason is because we have an immortal soul that God gave us. That's how God created us in his image and likeness. Right. It's not because because God has flesh. That's not what it means, image and likeness. It means we have intellect and free will. That's how we're like God. God has intellect. He's sentient. He can abstract. He has the power of, he can know the essence of things, and he is free. God is free. He is not controlled by anything. He makes free choices, and so that is how we are like God. And people, but again, these people are evolutionists. Of course, most Catholics out there know that they can't believe in evolution, or should I say, most traditional Catholics know that. There are a few who don't even know that. Look at Father Paul Robinson. He believes in evolution.
The book that Most Holy Trinity is not just a seminary. They had a school up there in Michigan. When they moved to Florida, they still had a school, but I think they changed the name from being the same, But anyway, they paid to reprint certain books. Some of them were excellent choices, like Hugon is a 3-volume manual for philosophy. They reprinted it in Latin. Okay, good expense. They also reprinted science books for the school. And, it's clear that they were written in the 50s by people that believe that, evolution, basically. Maybe not the super godless version, if you want to call it that. But anyway, so that was in the book that they were using in a traditional Catholic school. And I didn't actually utilize it until I was a teacher in Cincinnati. What they use now, I don't know. Maybe the same thing. But, that error is a little more widely, I don't even want to say accepted. It's just that people are not nearly as clear as they should be. But we can get into this. The other thing, on the 20th, I think it was, the Houthis basically said they're going to do a blockade on Saudi Arabia's usage of the secondary strait in that part of the world, which takes about another 6 million barrels offline. So not a small thing. And this is at the time when basically the whole world is hitting tank bottoms or rapidly approaching them. So that was already bad enough, but then you compound it with another blockade or extending of the blockade, and you could have a situation where you should have a situation, barring some sort of sanity entering the picture, where, the next couple of months is really going to start to get kind of gnarly. How fast and where it gets gnarliest, it's not going to be equal everywhere, but there's troubles. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think it is time to talk about that, because I've seen a lot of things right now. Of course, I'm looking at the big picture. I'm reading the daily news, but I'm also tracking the big picture. And one of the things I'm seeing is that Trump is somewhat desperate because, as you said, they're approaching the bottoms, and you can't suck every bit of oil out of these tanks like you do with a straw with your McDonald's cup, trying to get every last little bit of lemonade. You angle the straw, you hold the cup like this and point it down in the corner.
There's quite a bit of stuff in the bottom, like as a percentage, it's much higher of a percentage of the total volume that's basically unusable than most people probably would ever suspect.
It's unusable because of what it is. I think it's thicker and everything, but also it's required to maintain the stability of the surrounding structures.
Yep. Below you go below a certain percentage, and the structure itself will fail. I mean, even a pipeline, you have to have oil in it all the time. A lot of those different things cannot just sit idle or partially idle for any length of time without being either ruined or, notably affected, where you're going to have to spend a bunch of money to bring it back to where it needs to be.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind here. So,
okay. Well, you want to get rolling?
Yeah. We're basically all rolling.
All right. Well, welcome to the Inquisitors. I'm Gladius Veritatis, joined again by Matthew. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the just the world economic situation, particularly as it is affected by the oil supply and the changes that have been taking place in recent months, and then maybe touch a little bit upon whatever's going on in the AI world, which is definitely your area of expertise, not mine. But yeah, here we are in 2026. Today is a very glorious feast day. July 22nd is St. Mary Magdalene. You're talking about a woman whose change was complete, profound, and obviously, because of the great love in that conversion process, not only was she totally cleansed by divine grace, but became, basically a favorite, if you will, of our Lord. I mean, she was the first one to see him, probably his mother, but, the first one that's accounted for once he rose from the dead. She was one of just a handful who held fast until the very end at the foot of the cross. So you're talking about a pretty major figure in salvation history. And I did have the blessing to go to St. Baume, I think it's called. It's been a long time since I was there, but it's the cave where she lived out her life in Provence in France. And it's kind of funny. I was telling my wife when I hiked up there, it was sometime in January, I think. It was raining like crazy. And it's a pretty good hike, And I was wearing, I think it was basically it was the winter coat that I had acquired when I was in the seminary. So it was like a, 3/4 length black coat. Not a raincoat, but a coat. Anyway, it was raining so hard, and then it finally stopped, and the coat was just soaked. So I just hung it on a tree going up the hiking path because I knew it would be there when we got back because nobody else was out there. Like no sane local was going to, hey, let's go check it out in a rainstorm. But I only had one opportunity. So we hiked up. And it's amazing. It's an amazing place, despite the ravages of Vatican II. Beautiful altar inside the cave at this point, probably been there for hundreds of years. There's a little, I think it's like it's a residence. I don't know that anybody lives there now because there's so few monks and sisters and everything in the area, but used to be, you'd have, I think it's Dominicans were in charge of it, and they would a couple of them would live up there, at least for a time, and probably trade off. Just beautiful area of France, an amazing experience to go see. You can just kind of ponder, like, what was it like to be here at this time? The time she was there, living in the wild. It's still pretty wild in that area, but, and obviously being so holy and so contemplative, right? I mean, that's one of the main things that comes through in the gospel, particularly when, Martha complains and our Lord makes it clear that Mary has chosen the better part. You can imagine the kind of just constant coming and goings of, say, angels Yeah, it's a pretty amazing place. And if you got that, you don't need AI and you don't need oil. But let's get cranking on what
Yeah.
the way the
Yeah.
modern world works.
So as far as what's
You
going
need
on right
oil.
now, it really strikes me that we're on the cusp of things changing again,
Yeah,
because we've had this lull since the first attack on Iran's infrastructure and the closing
yeah.
of the Strait of Hormuz. We had oil.
They've been papering it over, right? I mean, basically,
And
they've been
I don't
drawing down the
remember.
reserves and shipping them overseas, just
Yes.
kind of make sure that it doesn't get too clear too fast that we are, in fact, in a very serious situation.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase I heard used was Trump was kind of selling it off to the highest bidder, just kind of clearing out the oil reserve that's supposed to be for emergency use for America.
Right.
And
I
we're
think
getting
it's
very close
also,
to that.
I think there was some intentional stuff and not merely highest bidder, although they may have been within the same categories. But Europe in particular, for example, because they don't actually supply much of their own oil, and there's so much travel and business between the two, if America is still sitting okay, but Europe is like totally screwed, well, if you let that come to pass without trying to manipulate it, you're going to wake up everybody everywhere, right? Like the Americans
Yeah.
will come to realize, okay, well, I can't even go to Europe on my business trip. Why not? Well, they cancel the flights because there's no jet fuel, or etc.
Yeah. So we had this, obviously, when these Straits of Hormuz got shut down the first time a few months ago, it was unprecedented. This had never happened before. And gas went up and oil went up and everything. And I wish I had written down what the peak was, because I think we're getting back pretty close to that peak. I mean,
Yeah,
here, gas is back up to 350 at the cheapest stations.
yeah. I
And
passed a couple of like 415s on the way back from the town where I work. It's
the
always a
question
little more
is,
here than there, but
what was the last peak? And see,
right.
but here's the weird thing is sometimes there's like a bankruptcy analogy where it's little by little and then all at once.
Right.
So
How did you go bankrupt, sir? Slowly
yeah,
at first and then all at once.
what I mean by that, and let me explain. The thing is, it's like a lot of the little by little happens behind the scenes, under the
Mm.
surface, and then just boom, all of a sudden it happens. So, for example, the oil price. I think Trump has been frantically trying to maintain some, because he knows that Iran's main strength. Iran can't defeat the United States of America. They can outsurvive them, and they could make life extremely difficult. They could impose a huge penalty and dollars and lives if we ever tried to invade them or even one of their islands. But they can't defeat us. What they can do is destroy or damage the global economy and then thus come in through the back door, as it were. And of course, because that's our strength. If our economy collapses, then our people get upset. They'll vote out Trump. They'll vote out the Republicans.
Sure.
And then they win. So I think that's the danger here.
So for whatever it's worth, and we can just move past this point, but the wargaming that people in Washington did specifically on Iran, even years ago, said that they would in fact beat us, especially if the battle's over there, which it would be, right? I mean, they have better missiles and more of them, and they actually have the capacity to keep making them. Ours stink. We're out, and we don't have the infrastructure to crank them out. It's a very bad combo. In my mind, and I can't prove it, but just based on what I've seen, I think if they wanted to go all out, they could just utterly eliminate everything that we have already over there. And then that leaves you to, okay, what, are you going to just fire stuff from America? Is it any good anymore? Are they going to be able to intercept it? I mean, they took down some, what were they, F-22s? Anyway, they took down a couple of fighters that, we've always been like, oh, you can't take them down. Well, they did. And there's the fact that, they've got a better relationship, say, with Russia and China than we do. And if you, want to consider that, well, both Russia and China also have better missiles, more of them, and the capacity to keep cranking them out. So you got three people they're not on the same side, right? Because, I mean, Russia is not exactly, they tend to talk one way, and then when something goes down, you may or may not actually have their assistance. which isn't to say they're worse. I mean, we are the problem, but um, the sheer volume that's already in place, and then the capacity to just keep on going. I mean, it's common knowledge at this stage that we've basically blown through a ton of our missiles in Iran, in Ukraine, right?
Yep.
In Israel. It's like we don't have that many left, and that's a problem.
But this
That's
price
basically
of
why
oil,
in World War II we basically buried Hitler in stuff.
yes,
Right. I mean,
indeed.
that was it. Once we entered the war, we were such a juggernaut at that point in history. Just keep sending more planes than they can possibly shoot down, more men, and of course set aside all morality and just bomb the snot out of civilians by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. But even if they didn't do that, we probably the war would have ended in the same way, more or less, simply because we could keep cranking out more stuff than the Germans could.
But yeah, this price of oil, I think, is where we need to keep paying attention because I think
it's going to keep going up. I mean,
it's our weak point. It's the pain point for America.
Right. Well, the Houthis just said they're going to do the blockade. I don't think we talked about this since we officially started, but the Houthis, who I believe are some sort of a tribe in Yemen, which is, fundamentally immaterial, not to be a jerk or anything, but the bottom line is they have capacity, they have experience, they have a track record of being able to do certain things, especially on a very limited budget. And they announced, I believe, 2 days ago that they're going to do a blockade on Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia has been able to basically divert something like 6 million barrels a day to make it out through this secondary strait, the name of which eludes me. It's something like Baba El Baba. Again, don't really care. It's a second strait in the area close to Hormuz, whereas if you shut that down, it basically just exacerbates the problem by that much more. And they just announced this 2 days ago. And I think you have some pundits or whatever that said before this that if this comes to pass, you're going to get oil at least $130 a barrel, which would be higher than the previous high. So, it definitely, okay. Yeah. I mean, look how narrow that is coming out of the Red Sea, so I get, you could, it may not do much damage, but it looks like you could practically shoot a slingshot across that.
Yeah.
And so if you have experience, some weaponry, and you have, better positioning, you could shut that down with relative ease.
Yeah, I don't think you can emphasize too much. You can't overdo it on emphasizing just how important oil is to the global economy. I mean, most of these advanced first world countries do not have enough oil for themselves, especially Europe. Now, America, I understand, is kind of, that we have enough, but we're on the global market. We're not some kind of a nationalist, fascist.
Right. We're not going to do what some countries would sensibly do, which is, okay, cool, we're just not going to ship any out anymore. That's not. We are run by a criminal class that is going to get what they can while they can. They really have no loyalty and they don't care. Yeah. So even if we were producing as much as we needed, we still would not actually have as much as we needed because the snakes who run the show would happily ship plenty of it around the world, and they would happily, put their mother on board too and give their mom away too. I mean, we're talking about some major league scum that doesn't operate like normal people. I mean, we're not in this pickle because these are average people who are just a little bit more driven or whatever. Like these are
you say they would ship it off, but actually it's not so much they are intentionally just taking this batch of oil and shipping it. What it is it's all in the open global market. Of course, I know I said global, haha, you know what I mean. The worldwide, everything's worldwide. There's nothing local or national. So it's everything's the highest bidder. It's kind of like on eBay. You might get a good deal on a laptop from somebody local, but when he places that on eBay, you got millions of people eyeballs on it. It's going to sell for what it's worth. The value's going to do this and within a tight range, and that's how the global oil price is.
These are basically corporations selling to other corporations. They're not countries in any sense like what you and I are used to and what was talked about throughout history.
Yeah.
They are corporations or simply branches of the one grand corporation. And so loyalty is zero. Obviously, I mean, we should all know that if we've been paying any attention in recent times. And, if it's already going north of 4 up here, which it is, and this news just happened, and it's not like people grasped the magnitude immediately and it started flying. It was already starting to creep back up. But once this situation becomes a little clearer, plays out with respect to its actual impact and influence of the overall situation, and people realize the magnitude a little bit more, I would fully expect at least $5 up here. I mean, it's already above 4. It doesn't take a whole lot to say.
That's the key point. We don't know. That's the key point. Is things become unpredictable. You have unpredictable consequences. Once the rubber band snaps and it goes back to its shape, we don't know what's going to happen, because this whole thing is a global, worldwide, interconnected thing. So, for example, just to recap, even if America produces 100 million barrels a year, and we actually that's probably way too little, but let's say 100 million barrels per unit per time period, and we use 100 million barrels per time period, you'd be like, that's self-sufficiency. But gas price could still go from $2 to $5 or $6. And you might be like, how? Nothing's changed over here. Not a single oil facility has been bombed. Not a single thing has been blockaded over here. Well, it's because everything is placed on the worldwide market. And so the people over there are all suffering. They need more. They're going to pull from our market.
What could I
the
get?
Price up.
Yeah, it's basically kind of like a what? Well, I could get X if I sell it to country Y. We're going to keep it here, but we're going to charge you the same as if you were there.
Yes, that's how it works. Yeah.
And of course, a ton of these things are the prices are dictated by future trading, which in itself is totally insane, immoral gambling.
Yes, it is.
It's one of the tools they use to fix the markets for all kinds of things. But in this case, the paper, it's like with the silver market, right? Like the paper market and reality are not actually the same.
Yes.
There was a time in a recent past where it was like seriously disjointed, like way too much to last too long. That has since normalized. There's still a gap, but there was a time when people were paying in a different part of the world for real. They were paying way more than what was being quoted as the spot price. So with oil, same thing, right? You got like, okay, even during these recent months, you had situations where, okay, the paper price is 90, but if people were actually taking delivery of real oil, they were paying like 140. So that gap is still in place. At some point, it's going to get chipped away at, notably. And I think that point is rapidly approaching.
Remember they were talking about the spot price versus the contract price? This was like a few months ago, and there was this big gap between them. And it had to do with the reserves. And once the reserves kind of get lower, and once things kind of catch up, it's going to have to snap up to where that spot price is.
Basically, once there are fewer bullets in their gun, or some of the skullduggery and little smoke and mirrors has played out its effectiveness, right? And I'm not saying that they don't have more smoke and mirrors, that it will just be done completely. But once it really starts to, the effects of their games, once those effects have reached their end, you're going to start to see that gap close. Probably not completely. I mean, honestly, it won't close completely until you get rid of the silly futures market, and that's not going to happen until, the system is basically totally transitioned to whatever the new one is. But I'm sure they're still going to have some gambling on there where they can manipulate because they can't get over it.
Yeah, I just shared on the screen kind of what I was talking about. There's like a $30 to $40 gap between the
which is exactly what I was saying, like 90 versus 130, 140. I mean, that's it right there. And this is what it's saying currently. Yeah.
that the future, pardon the pun, but what what we're going to be seeing for the price of oil is closer to that 140 than the 90. And see
So this
things
is
like,
this is basically from today, right now.
yeah, and see
So
this is what we said months ago when the first round
right,
of attacks. We said
yeah,
that the effect hasn't hit us yet, and I'm still saying that. I don't think we've fully seen. Trump has done everything. He's pulled out all the stops trying to minimize the damage. And for a while there, when we had this whole ceasefire, I thought Trump was being clever. I'm like, I got to take my hat off. That guy is clever. It's only May. Things are going to calm down, and the price of gas was going back down. It actually went down to $2.90 a gallon around here, 2.90 something. I'm like, it's still a little more than it was when we started, but most Americans probably will, psychologically, it's so much cheaper than it was, so people will be like, we're back to normal. And I'm like,
right.
he's not even going to take the hit now in November. The Republicans will get their votes. I gotta hand it to those guys. They know what they're doing. But now I got to take it all back, because now things are really ramping up. He's threatening on a daily basis. He's attacking on a daily basis.
Right.
Now he's saying that he's going to blow up a bridge or something else every time a ship is attacked.
Well, now you got basically everywhere is reaching tank bottoms. Some places more or less reached them months ago. There were some countries that rationed right out of the gate because they had no supply of their own. But now you're going to end up with, what they've been able to paper over. They basically reach the end of, once you get tank bottoms and get down to that sludge in the bottom that you can't really do much with, you end up with reality. Basically, it's kind of funny how these things work. But remember that I wrote a whatever you call a limerick, but one of the lines that has always stuck in my head from the Ode to Reality was, "Deal with reality, or it will deal with thee." And so that's kind of like a theme for this whole time, not just with oil, with everything, right? Yes. With the medical industrial complex, food, right? I mean, you just had that massive recall, and I didn't even follow it much, but apparently there was a huge recall for lettuce or something, and it tested positive for fecal matter, and it's probably grown with liquefied human beings anyway. Welcome to Soylent Green. But there was like a recall, and then I think, I didn't read about this, my wife said that then some reps for that company, which is huge, went to DC, paid some money, basically paid some people off. The recall was rescinded. And then you end up, she said some chain in the Carolinas, like Ingalls or something, doesn't matter, was basically repackaging. Since the recall got recalled or rescinded, that means that all those companies that bought the trash can't actually unload it back at no cost to them, but to the company, right? To the company and to the taxpayers. I'm not sure who pays for all that, but I'm pretty sure it's us. But once they undid it, they're just stuck with a crappy product, so they're repackaging it as their own without it being changed at all. I mean, the moral of the story is grow as much of your own stuff as you can. If you cannot, or you need to supplement it, go to farmers markets. There's farmers markets everywhere, and quite possibly more of them now than there were before because of issues like this. People are trying to, they're losing trust in the system, which is good. They never really should have had any, but hey, Rome wasn't built in a day. More and more people are waking up to the skullduggery, treachery, perfidy, dare I say, of the Red Sea pedestrians, which is also good. It'd be nice if it had happened before, but hey, God's will is perfect in all ways, and people will wake up and see the light, through His help when He knows is the best time. But yeah, the oil situation is definitely going to be a problem. I mean, I got my car's at the mechanic today, just getting an oil change and some new tires. And new tires are not what they were when we were young men. It's like $800, and I mean, $800 for tires when I was in my 20s, I'd be like, what the hell are you driving? It was like Pirellis for a Ferrari or something, now, but now it's like a basic car, $800. So, and I have to do it because it's my workhorse. But at the same time, I'm like, if I could get away with it, not doing it, I'd love to, because I'm not 100% sure how long the car is even going to be useful. I could be pleasantly surprised. But time will tell. But any kind of notable expense, especially that has a relation to something as just sketchy as the present oil situation, it just has that extra degree of hesitancy to shell out the bucks.
Yeah, I think Trump is not backing down from this. I mean, this Iran war is far from over, and like I said, we've
Right.
kind of walked up to the brink already. We've done all that work this last few months, and so now
Sure.
it's not going to take much for things to really start hitting home, and for the consequences to inevitably show up. And it also makes me wonder, what do they have planned? Because that we have two parties in this country now. Before you say, "Oh, they're a uniparty," well, yes and no. In reality, yeah, they basically do the same things. There's very little difference in reality. I mean, seriously, even things like the welfare state. You get as many. They throw out as much free money when Republicans are president as when Democrats are.
Sure.
There might be some differences about who they favor. When it comes to like the average common man getting like $1,000 check from the government, that usually happens more when the Republicans are president, in my experience.
Right.
Anyhow. Things like abortion, well, that's status quo. Nothing really, not much change there. I mean, maybe the judges, maybe there's liberal and conservative judges, maybe there's a bit of differences there. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of differences in reality. But in fact, we have two political parties, and they do technically have different platforms, things that they push. Now, if the powers that be are basically driving the Republicans off a cliff right now, they're going to have some kind of a mandate, some kind of a sweep in November. What do they have planned for us? Or do they have planned something that their Democrats would be the ones to push in? You know what I mean? Because when they want a war, for example, they put the Republicans in charge, right? When they want to do something, when they want to push us more toward communism and socialism, then they put the Democrat in charge. And so, even though they are different, they're not that much different in reality, but they do have different platforms. And even though the same people are controlling both, they have to put the right one in charge based on what they want to do. So, for example,
if you want to sucker the Republicans, especially the MAGA-tards, people who actually still believe something, positive about Trumpenstein, if you want to get them to go along with the techno gulag, which they basically have not done much in resistance to it, you still have to have Trump in there, being effective. And I'm not saying it, he basically ignores Congress anyway. Like this entire war, and frankly, going back to the Ukraine conflict, right? None of this stuff has actually been approved in the ways that are supposed to happen through what the Constitution says. Now, a big part of that, in my opinion, is because the U.S. is a corporation, not a country, and they don't follow the law of the land because they follow their own corporate dictates and answer to their own corporate bosses, which is also why, talk of your representative representing you is just detached from the present reality.
Yeah.
They leave certain trappings there precisely to fool you into thinking that it is one way when it's really another. And yet the agenda marches on while people are still stuck with, this false image of how it works. And that's not just true in the U.S. It's true in the whole world. That's precisely why cooties went down the way it did, because they already had all their stooges in place, right? That's how you get like split second. Oh yeah. Everybody agrees on A, what had happened, B, what's the proper response, see how heavy-handed that response is going to be if you don't comply. That is a function of, something much more powerful above all those, and they're all on the same team, and they all are reading from the same script.
Yeah.
If you had any sort of independence and normalcy about it, like what we may have known in decades past, even if something real had happened and it had some sort of response, it would never happen in that way, because each country, just like individuals, would have to process the information and make decisions for themselves. Even if they ended up being somewhat similar to each other, it never would have happened the way that it did unless the whole thing, which was the The
That was
name of the
of it,
paper
wasn't
from
it?
the Rockefeller paper from 2010.
Yeah, everything was done in lockstep. But I guess my point is, lies are not always to be ignored. We shouldn't
Oh,
ignore the
sure.
official lies. That's
Oh,
why
yeah.
I pay attention at all to the modern media, to the mainstream
Oh,
media.
sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
is it lies? Oh, it's almost 100% lies. Well,
Right.
ignore it then. No, because I want to know
Right.
what they have planned for us. Those
Exactly.
lies affect us. Those lies will affect you and your family. If the lies are telling people the Russians are evil orcs, we must go to war with them, I want to know it. Not that I'm
Right.
going to believe that crap. Of course, it's lies, but I
Sure.
want to know if they got us signed up for war so I can prepare. It's the same with
Sure.
everything. It's the same with the two-party system. Who cares? Yes, the Democrat or Republican in charge, it's not going to make a huge difference, but it will make some difference, because insofar as it'll signal what plans they have for us.
Sure.
And if they get us into
Are
war,
they about
that
to
makes
put
a
the
difference.
pedal? Are they about to smash the pedal down? Or as they say in French, what is it? Marcher le champignon. Stomp on the mushroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
the word for mushroom.
Yeah, it was interesting when I heard that the first time years ago. I'm like, oh, it makes sense, especially probably with the way the pedals looked in the older cars. And just as a little nugget, I don't know if we talked about this before, but where France is concerned and modern waste and infrastructure, I mean, the roads in America are garbage, right? The Tour de France has been happening for over 100 years. It goes through hills by the seaside, high up into the mountains. Those guys are hauling butt on bikes. And if you have some sort of irregularity in the road, and there's like 70 guys in a peloton going downhill at 60 miles an hour or more, that can't happen year after year after year after year with no real problems, unless the roads are at a much higher level of quality than we have here. But those were all built. I mean, they've been racing through there since whatever, the 20s or earlier, hell, I don't know. But bottom line is, when they say, oh, yeah, we just can't do this or that because of, like in Maine, they give you the frost heaves excuse. No, it's just you're using crappy material and doing a half-assed job, while all the money that gets allocated falls into a black hole and helps, build the underground cities or whatever, or just lines people's pockets. So we're in a time where they tell us, they lie to us about everything, right? We should have magnificent infrastructure. There's no reason why, not just we, but all of Europe, all the world, that, there's the technology is there, the know-how, the material, the money. They just choose to throw us scraps, and I won't say happily take them, but we certainly don't put up enough of a fight to be like, no, this is garbage, dude. Like, let's get some accountability. Where'd this $400 million go for this project that was delayed 5 times,
Yeah, they don't want us to have a nice utopian future with clean energy and ample energy and plenty of money. They really don't want that. They've destroyed a lot of that technology and hidden it and whatnot. Tesla and the ether we talked about last week. And there's a lot of truths that they're suppressing. And what do they give us instead? They weave whole webs of lies about outer space, and we're going to colonize the planets. We're going to make AI. We're going to create this AGI and all this stuff. They feed us these false hopes, these false goals, which are complete dead ends, complete red herrings, just off track dead ends. And so how much better would it be if we ignored those dead ends and focused on things we could do, and focused on the technologies that are real, based on the real world that we actually live in, on actual reality. But it's like they don't want us to be happy and prosperous and fertile and all, and have identity and all these good things. They don't want what's good for us. And see, the one thing I want to say is these nuggets of reality do matter. There's a lot of people who think these subjects don't matter. Who cares who did 9/11? Or yeah, you might have some good points about poking holes in the scientism, or poking holes in the globe heliocentric paradigm, but it's unknown. Or you can look into it if you want, but I don't really have time. I don't really care. A lot of people are apathetic about that. But if you think about it, it really has a lot of effect on your daily life, more than you think. Because think of how much time is wasted, how much money is wasted on the whole outer space paradigm.
Yeah.
all dreams and goals.
Well, look
Having
at the financial black hole of NASA, the military-industrial complex. Particularly if you're inclined to think that nukes are fake and gay, right? It's like, well, they've spent billions and billions of dollars on these weapons. I'm not saying the weapons are free. I'm just saying most of it is just black hole money, just like NASA. Money isn't the end all be all, but the point is they're basically robbing us every day without any sort of consequences.
And when they've done it 5 or 10 times, who is going to stand up and boldly doubt that they're going to do it an 11th time? I mean, We've seen what happened in COVID. We've seen all the corruption over the years.
Sure, that's who they are.
Much, and again, once you understand the nature of the world and you see how much NASA has kind of just siphoned and how little they've delivered in return, they give us cartoons, they give us these pathetically fake things, these magic shows, dangling and claiming to be in outer space, and they're doing all these green screen things, and they get millions of dollars a year for that. And I mean, it's like a black hole of money.
I think part of it is number one, the apathy, the lack of appropriate response to learning some of these things comes from many things. It's not just the brainwashing, right? It's the fact that the food and the water is jacked with a bunch of garbage that is precisely designed to make us weaker, both in body and mind. And so then, when you're having to work maybe 2 jobs, maybe 3, just to stay where you live with some food in your belly and for your family, you also have lower energy after all that work. So it's like, look, I know there's stuff over there. It's probably an issue, but it's not even that I don't care. It's just I don't have the oomph to do it. And I totally sympathize with that, because that's precisely why they've arranged a system with the way they've arranged it.
Well, I guess the answer then is, for all those listening to this, is when you have someone, a fellow traditional Catholic, maybe they have a podcast, maybe their names are Matthew and Gladius, when they have done the work and they've done the research and you have reason to trust them, and they say, look, I've looked into all of it, I know both sides, it's clearly, solidly on this side, you should give them some credence. You should, by default, almost trust them over these liars who have lied umpteen times. Dozens of times.
They've proved that they are liars to the core. And the other thing to keep in mind is
when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
When someone tells you who they are, believe them.
And grasp in the core of your being that this is a war. And the enemy knows it's a war. They've acted that way consistently for a long time. It's also why they've gained the upper hand so thoroughly in this particular war. It's largely due to the fact that most of the people that they're subduing don't even realize that it's a war. And so if you've lied to me a bunch and you've basically made it clear that you are my enemy, my mortal enemy, then if I fail to take you at your word and see you as such, I'm going to keep drawing close for an embrace. Well, if I keep embracing an enemy as if he's not an enemy, all I'm doing is putting him within reach to be able to keep stabbing me in the back.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's basically what they've continued to do. And because people have not realized the gravity of the situation and the nature of the situation, meaning that it is a war and it is a war to the death, that's precisely why people basically keep getting run over and why they keep getting suckered, because they go to the enemy for information, who's obviously, not going to give you solid information or try and give you information that's for your own good. They're going to lie to you to keep you in the dark and asleep and feed you, feces-laden vegetables or whatever that get recalled and then get, unrecalled. I mean, no, I mean, they've done their work. But by all means, try and get some good food. And I will say this: most human beings, especially in America, and largely due to the fact that the food is such garbage, most people have become habituated to eating far more than the human body actually needs, especially once it's grown, right? Like your kids, they're growing. They need certain things that I no longer need because I'm already fully grown. At this stage, it's just about maintaining. Obviously, if you're sick, it's about getting back into a healthy zone and then getting stronger. But all the man-made junk is that. It's junk. If you can get your hands on, some things grown either in your own backyard or maybe by a local farmer who seems like a reasonable guy to trust. And I'm not saying don't do your due diligence there. It's not like it's a given that just because some guy's a farmer, you can trust him. Because one of the things that they do, some people will go buy the shit at Walmart and then go resell it at a farmer's market because the prices are usually higher. So that strikes me as a classic Red Sea pedestrian kind of move. But, so do your due diligence, maybe get to know the farmers. I'm not saying you need to know his whole life story, but, just have a chat, maybe at the market over the table. Just a normal chat that gives you a good vibe for like, is this person real, seemingly reasonably trustworthy? And your intuition, especially if you are somebody who, is faithful, say, for example, to praying the rosary, and you're living a decent spiritual life, the gifts of the Holy Ghost are not just some thing that mentioned in a book, right? Yeah, they're mentioned in books, but it's the whole idea is to have that be a part of our daily reality, and if you're in a frame of mind and practice and habit of being quiet, interiorly, so you can hear things, God leads us into the right places, even in the vast majority of cases when we don't even realize he's doing it. He's doing it precisely because we're so little and so thick, and he's so good. And so, if we put ourselves in the right position, he will lead us aright. And, we have to have good food, of which you actually need far less. And that's also totally in line with what? Just the overall spirit of mortification that is fundamental to the faith. Now, granted, that's been blasted by Vatican II, but we all know the reality. What do you got there? Some lovely tomatoes?
Yeah, when you mention reselling them, a couple things come to mind. The reason I had to laugh is especially tomatoes. You're not going to pull that off with tomatoes. See the one on the top there? It's kind of pinkish. It has like 4 sections. Look at the one below it. That's more like, and you can see in the pictures there, the ones that have more color, they're deeper, and they're juicier. Sure. Those are what you get out of your garden. They don't travel well. They don't last as long. They don't transport well, but they have a lot more flavor. Right. They have a lot more vitamins, and they're probably the most valuable thing you can grow as far as like how much per pound, right? Because you're taking a seed which is worth almost nothing, and you're making tens of dollars worth of product. So it's a real even if
one more than that, if you can save the seeds and use them again, right?
Yeah, even if you were to buy a plant for a few dollars, you're going to get so many dollars worth of product out of it. You're basically creating value out of nothing. But the other thing that reminds me of is the old famous Simpsons skit about the steamed hams. A lot of you probably know about that, where the principal is entertaining the superintendent for dinner, and he burns the ham or something, and then he looks across the street. There's basically their equivalent of a McDonald's, and so he goes over there, gets essentially McDonald's burgers, and presents them to him like he cooked them. And of course, the superintendent commented how they taste a lot like what they serve at McDonald's, and there they call it Krusty Burger, but it's basically McDonald's. It's a cheap soy, half soy kind of burger. It's very
half human, partially human being.
Yeah, so just the idea of passing off this fake, crappy fast food burger as a homemade burger, everyone laughs at it. It was one of the most famous Simpsons skits, and people still, it's all over YouTube. You can find it. It's been done in different languages and everything. But yeah, growing your own food is important, and I guess what I was also going to say is we need to get to this point where we say things like, can we all just agree on? So, for example, can we all just agree that you're not going to get the truth easily from the internet? So if you do a Google search, whether it's the shape of the earth, whether it's 9/11, whether it's the Holocaust, whether it's any of these other things, even what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Iran, the state of the Iran war, what Trump is doing to Iran, you're not going to, the powers that be have these structures. They have the media, they have the control of the media, and you're not going to get an easy path to finding the truth. So, speaking to someone out there listening who might disagree with me on one of these topics, I have someone in mind, on Cath Info. There's someone, he's a nice guy. He's been a Cath Info member for quite a while. In fact, I don't want to name him, but I'm just going to say his name starts with Saint. His username starts with ST period. I'll just say that. He disagrees with me on the shape of the earth. Okay.
Sure.
But, I would like to say to him, can we agree on some things? Can we agree that the media doesn't always have our best interest? Can we agree that Google lies? Can we agree that Google, when they put the little notices up, this is a false thing, this is not true, this is an archaic whatever, this is let me fact check this for you. Can we agree that most or all of those fact checks are BS about most topics? Can we agree that some of the arguments that he might that his side puts forward are embarrassing for his side? Can we agree with that? So, for example, the ships going over the horizon being an argument for that there's a curve. Can we agree that that's outdated? When the Greek philosopher, was it Socrates that said that? Oh, well, I don't remember. Don't quote me on which one, but a Greek philosopher first pointed that out as an argument. But can we agree that Greek philosopher didn't know what he was talking about because he didn't have zoom cameras? So even if, but let's say even if in this crazy scenario, if I want to grant that you might be correct, can we at least both agree that that is not a good argument? Can we shut up for once and for all about the horizon?
Where
because
Google
literally take a zoom camera and zoom in and bring the ship back. Every time you can bring the ship back. So if it were blocked by physical curvature, you wouldn't be able to do that. So, things like that. And I bet you I could come up with others. Maybe to build a bridge, maybe I need to build that bridge out, come up with more and more things like that. But it really bothers me if someone won't give any ground like that, if someone won't give an inch, as they say. I think there's a red flag there. I think that they're too attached to their side because you know what? I will give an inch. If I'm talking about the shape of the earth and they bring up the topic of satellites, I'm not going to say more than I know. I'm not going to bluff my way into more certainty than I have. Satellites is an area that I have not fully figured out yet. I understand that NASA is the number one purchaser of helium. I know there's this ether. There's energy in the actual atmosphere. There's actually energy every so many feet up, and you can harvest that in kind of a free manner. And Nikola Tesla understood that. Maybe there is some kind of a ether. There's some kind of if you get something up to a certain height, it will just kind of orbit, for lack of a better term. We don't know that. It's hard to test that. I haven't figured out satellites, but just because I'll admit that doesn't mean, then you're full of it about the shape of the earth. No, there are other things that are pretty dead set, pretty clear cut. For example, water does not curve to maintain a shape. If I give you a vessel, the water is always going to be flat on top. You're never going to get it. If you bend this thing down here, you're never going to get the water to bend with it. It just does not happen. That's not how water behaves. And, there's a lot of things like that. There's much, and those pieces of evidence are so clear cut that they're almost a slam dunk. They almost prove one side. And so even if there's some iffy points here and there that I will grant, when something's the slightest bit iffy, I will grant it.
Well, I mean, the bottom line too on that specific point, and you can apply this to a lot of others, is just because you don't have every answer to every question doesn't mean that you cannot demonstrate that the official version is BS. Like that, you can actually have a situation where it's like, okay, I'm not really sure about exactly how it works, right? because I'm a human being and they've been lying to us and I've only got so much time and
Yep.
etc. But I know that these guys who prove that they're liars, like to the core of their being, are full of it on this particular thing. This model can't work doesn't mean that I have to know every single thing about the other model or the real story.
Yeah, as one flat Earth proponent put out, he said, what do you call it? Just tearing down, disproving something is independent of replacement.
Right.
I forgot the first word. It is independent of replacement. So
sure.
Just because you discover in your parents' closet documentation proving that you are adopted,
right, doesn't mean you know who your parents are.
Yeah,
and it means that now I know that it's not them.
You never find out your parents. You never find out who they really are. It does not mean that, well, until I find my real parents, these are my parents. No, you just prove that they aren't your parents.
Right.
They're your foster parents.
It's an excellent analogy. Sadly, not applied in real time in a lot of important discussions.
And so there's a lot of takeaways from this, a lot of lessons. And so number one, there are also some things that when you're watching a person, who they are, what they're about, what else they believe is irrelevant. It has nothing to do with trust. The person I heard that from, he was arrested a couple times for possession of pot. He doesn't believe in the Catholic faith. Mm-hmm. He has some vague notion of Christianity, but he doesn't even believe in the Trinity. He has all kinds of problems, but he pointed that out. And you know what? It rings true. It rings true. It makes sense. It aligns with reality and common sense. His analogy about finding the documentation in your parents' closet, it's not open for debate. It has nothing to do with him. He introduced me to this way of explaining it, this analogy. I take the analogy. I'm like, you know what? This is good stuff. And I go on and use it myself.
Well, it's just like the natural truths. It's like all the natural truths that are expounded by religions or philosophies that overall are false, right? It's just like when, saying like the worst of us is not all bad and the best of us is not all good, or, like you will hear, if you were to dig deep, for example, and we'll just start Confucianism or something, right? Even though I know it's a false religion or philosophy or whatever it is, it doesn't mean that every single thing that any adherent of that thinks or says or what that body teaches doesn't mean that it's all wrong, right? Especially because as Catholics, we should actually have that perspective even better, right? Because, sorry, my dog's barking. I'm not sure why. You have that original deposit. All that's happened over time is that people spread out and little bits of truth get lost. This bit gets lost over here. This bit gets lost over here. That's why God had to set aside one people and preserve them from that error. But frankly, if you look at the history of that people, all that does is underline how dangerous a landscape it was, right? Because even though he was giving them the truth and protecting that truth, they were constantly falling into errors, both especially practical, right? Falling into worshiping this demon over here. And, because they were in this world and a lot of their neighbors, if you will, were following erroneous ways. And because of the fall and the way our faculties have been affected, we much more easily gravitate toward that, especially because when you're on that path, you also tend to just have a little bit, more sensually satisfying, a softer sort of a path through life. Because the faith requires things of us that we are not inclined to naturally. But that's the whole point of grace and prayer and all these things, right? And the help of the sacraments, precisely because without that, there isn't any way that we would actually continue on that path with any great degree of success. That's just the nature of our situation.
Yeah, so I've used the analogy of a crossword puzzle, but really what that's about is the big picture. That's why you need the big picture, because that keeps the focus on what matters. It's not just this little detail or this one area of cosmology or, where man came from or the shape of the earth or what happened on this specific decade or this specific day in history. No, it's look at the big picture and that lets you know what lines up with other things. So if you're zoomed in on 10 across, you can argue, no, this goes in that square, in those squares. No, this goes in the squares. You can go back and forth. But if you zoom out and you see how it connects to some other rows, well, now you have more chance of getting it right, because it has to line up with 7 down and 13 down. And if there's not a E in this square and a P in this square, it ain't the right one. Right. And so I guess I've used the analogy of the crossword puzzle before, but what I didn't mention was that only works if you're in the big picture, if you're focused on the big picture. And so if you're a big picture person, you have the crossword puzzle. If you're not looking at the big picture, you don't have the rest of the crossword puzzle. All you're focusing on.
I think most minds tend to be one or the other, not like 100%, but most people tend to be stronger one way or the same thing with like the SAT, right? Most people tend to be stronger on the math side than the language, or vice versa. And I think, obviously natural gifts are dispersed differently, and some people have a little more balanced approach where they actually can see both that big picture, but also look at the smaller picture too, and relate it to the bigger, and God's gifts are not equally distributed, and that's okay. I mean, obviously it's supremely wise. It's according to his plan. But it behooves us to realize what our own personal strength is, right? Like if I know that I'm a really good big picture guy, but I'm not all that great with the minutiae, well, then one of the things I need to take some steps to try and be better at my weak spot. But also I need to, through interaction with my fellows, maybe discover somebody who's got strength where I have weakness and vice versa, and we can help each other. It's like, oh, this guy's insanely good at doing something I'm terrible at. Maybe I should actually try and benefit from the abilities that God gave to him, and hopefully in exchange help him benefit from the gifts that God gave to me.
And if he happens to be a rabbi for his full-time job, just ignore that part. Just come to him for his mathematical information, or his
or a little bit of truth. Maybe he speaks a little bit of truth about the Red Sea pedestrians and their treatment of the goy.
Yeah, like Brother Nathaniel, for example. He's like that. He's a Jew. He's not a traditional Catholic right now.
Right.
But he's somewhat conservative, and he does teach us. He pulls back the veil on what the Jews are really about. So you go to him for that. This guy might know a lot about cosmology. You have to ignore some of his other things. I mean, that's how it works. And that's how Bishop Williamson did things at the seminary. He would invite people in for one specific topic. He didn't have them teach you theology. He didn't have them, say mass, anything like that. No, he was only there for this one topic. He gave a conference and then he left, and that's what he was for. So,
maybe if you don't know how to garden, but you need to learn, there could be somebody very close to where you are who knows a lot, whose moral life is a total mess. And if that's your best opportunity for a teacher in that regard, so long as you can keep them separate and his immorality or whatever, or just the disorders that you're aware of from afar, as long as those don't impact the process and you need to learn it and that's your best opportunity to learn it, it would probably behoove you to try and pick his brain on those particular fronts. Just use your judgment and kind of keeping, be aware of, okay, well, maybe he's starting to drift off into a topic I don't want. Well, shut it down. Do it in a clear but firm and charitable way. Most people will respond well to that. And I think we're just afraid because of the way we've been conditioned to shut certain things down. We feel like it can't be done in a way that not only shuts it down, but still keeps the overall relationship intact for the purpose, that it exists.
Yeah, I've often noticed that there's like two kinds of friends. You can have your traditional Catholic friends who are with you on supernatural matters, and then all the people you agree with on natural matters almost are a whole different group of people. So the people at church, sometimes they're duped into all kinds of things. They watch Fox News, they're believing the mainstream media, but they go to your Latin Mass with you. So they're your brothers in the faith, but then you go home and your neighbor might be digging a pond. He might have a garden. He might be aware of all these natural issues, or people online, they're not Catholic.
One sec.
It just struck me how everything's kind of coming together and it's all very relevant. As far as like
Yeah.
AI in particular, that's really a topic for a whole other podcast. But it just
Sure.
it struck me how it connects, because I was watching these videos talking about what they expect to happen, and it presumes that our brains are just something that randomly happened. Okay,
Right.
it
They're
presumes
starting from a bogus premise, so therefore they're going to
Yeah.
reach bogus conclusions.
And so if you believe in, and they believe that all the order and intelligence evident in creation all happened from an explosion, and then things orbited and coalesced and formed suns and planets and everything spinning. It presumes that. And so if you believe that the universe happened that way, and you believe in abiogenesis, life coming from nothing, and our brains are just a bunch of neurons that collected together and somehow consciousness developed. Well, yeah, if you believe that, then you'll believe that you could have artificial consciousness. You could have artificial neurons.
Well, if you believe that, your brain isn't working and you need to get it checked.
Yeah. So, I mean, so these errors are very connected. And so,
sure. Well, look, I mean, what's the saying? Truth is one, right? And so it makes sense, even though error has manifold fronts and presentations, especially in these times where you have such an organized effort to achieve a certain rather nefarious and diabolical goal. All the different things that are happening have an aspect of coordination or unity, if you will, although that unity is with a design to basically try and bust apart the divinely appointed beautiful unity, and it will fail. It still, is a situation.
Yeah, we'll have to talk more next week about these big picture things all come together.
Well, hey, it's 2026, interesting times. God alone knows what will happen between now and the next time we talk, because, oil could be $1, oil could be $72. I mean, who knows? It's just, you got to be ready for anything, and that's why you got to make sure you grow your own veggies and, and reach out to people. Modern life is awfully just not natural in terms of the interactions we have with our fellows. And, you may not live near a whole bunch of saints. None of us do, but you live near people. And who's to say that the relationship that you establish with some people who are presently not on the right page with respect to matters of salvation, who's to say that you're not actually the one that God put in their proximity precisely to be his instrument, right? But if we don't contact them and try and, build a relationship, even if its initial foundations are largely related to natural matters, that could be, the avenue to which much greater things that are good for that person and yourself are able to happen.
So yeah, keep seeking the truth and trust those who deserve trust. Keep up the good fight and try to get prepared, at least mentally. Even if you're broke, you can always be prepared mentally.
And I mean, even if you have everything, if you're not prepared mentally, you're done anyway. So, I mean, the main thing is that mental, psychological, spiritual preparation, because you can only do so many physical preps, and Lord knows whether you'll actually have access to them at the appropriate time. But, God will help us, and as long as we stay connected to him, that's the key, regardless of whether you live in good times or the proverbial evil times. All right. Well, God bless everybody. And until next time, Matthew, take care, and please pray for us as we will pray for you. And St. Mary Magdalene, pray for us.